My name is Anna. For 3 years, I believed my greatest challenge in marriage was building a life with my husband, Mark. I was wrong. The true, relentless challenge had a name: Tamara Petrovna, his mother. She arrived 6 months after our wedding, a storm cloud in a sensible beige coat, her suitcases packed with a lifetime of grievances, and an unshakable conviction that no woman, least of all me, was good enough for her Maxim. Her own marriage to Nikolai Ivanovich had dissolved in quiet bitterness years ago, and our apartment, a spacious, if slightly faded, 3-room flat in a solid old building, became her conquered territory. Mark, my sweet, conflict-averse Mark, had pleaded. "She's alone, Anya, just for a little while. She needs us." A little while stretched into a permanent, suffocating reality. The apartment was not ours. It was hers. The kitchen, with its lingering smell of her strong cabbage soup, was her command center. The living room, dominated by her heavy dark wood sideboard and porcelain figurines of stern-faced ballerinas, was her court. I was a clumsy guest, a temporary occupant perpetually failing to meet standards. "Anna, you've used too much detergent again," her voice would slice through the morning peace as I loaded the washing machine. "Such waste. In my day, we made a bar of soap last a month." Or, as I attempted to cook dinner, "Is that how you chop onions? No wonder the salad weeps. Let me." And she would shoulder me aside, her movements sharp and efficient, a silent critique in every chop. Mark worked long hours, or so he said. I came to suspect he lingered at the office, finding spreadsheets and coffee breaks preferable to the atmospheric pressure at home. When he was present, he became a ghost, a man dissolving into the wallpaper. His strategy was appeasement. "She doesn't mean it like that, Anya," he'd whisper in our bedroom, the only room that felt partially mine. "She's just from a different generation. Be patient." She told me my job at the design firm is frivolous, that real women raise families or do serious work. "Well, maybe don't talk about the abstract projects. Tell her about the practical clients," he'd suggest, missing the point entirely. My love for him, once a bright, clear flame, began to gutter under the constant drip of his neutrality. He wasn't my ally. He was a diplomatic observer in the war for his own home. I felt myself shrinking, my voice growing quieter, my choices second-guessed. I stopped buying the modern art prints I loved. Tamara Petrovna called them scribbles. I gave up on cooking new recipes. I became an echo of myself, moving through the rooms on tiptoe. The breaking point, as these things often are, was absurdly small. A teacup. It was a simple modern cup I'd bought for myself, white porcelain with a single elegant blue stripe. A tiny rebellion. Tamara Petrovna hated it. "It looks cheap. It doesn't hold heat. It's insubstantial." That Saturday, she was in a particularly foul mood. A call from an old friend had reminded her of some perceived social slight from a decade ago, and the apartment vibrated with her indignation. I was washing my cup at the sink when her commentary began, a familiar litany about my mismanagement of household funds. That day, my patience, worn to a filament, snapped. "Tamara Petrovna," I said, my voice trembling but clear, "it's my cup. I bought it with my money. I like it. That is the end of the discussion." The silence that followed was profound and terrifying. She drew herself up, her eyes like chips of flint. Mark, who had been pretending to read a newspaper in the living room, slowly lowered it. "You dare," she hissed, the words barely audible. "You dare speak to me in that tone in my son's home?" "It's our home," I corrected, the bravest and most foolish thing I had ever said. It was as if I had pulled a pin from a grenade. Her composure shattered. "Your home? Your home?" Her voice rose, scalding and shrill. "You, a silly girl who can't even make borscht properly? You, who distract my Maxim from his family duties with your nonsense? You are a guest here, a temporary one." She turned to Mark, who had risen to his feet, pale and stricken. "Maxim, enough. Look at her ingratitude. I will not be disrespected under this roof. I have endured her incompetence, her modern airs, for your sake. But no more." She pointed a bony finger at me, her arm rigid with fury. "She goes. Do you hear me? She packs her things and she leaves. Today. This is a family matter, and she is not family." My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Mark, my husband. This was the moment he would finally step forward, put his arm around me and say, "Mother, this is Anya's home too. We are a family. You will apologize." I saw the struggle on his face, a war between a lifetime of filial obedience and the faint echo of his vows to me. The obedience, nurtured and weaponized over 30 years, won. It was a swift, brutal surrender. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked at the floor, at the pattern on the old carpet his mother had brought. His voice, when it came, was a hollow whisper. "Anya, perhaps it would be better if you stayed with your sister for a few days, just to let things calm down." The floor seemed to drop away. The air left my lungs. In that moment, I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt erased. The last 3 years, my love, my efforts to build a home, all of it was rendered null by his quiet, devastating agreement. I was the problem to be removed so his peace could be restored. Hot tears of sheer shock and humiliation blurred my vision. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at this stranger I had married. Tamara Petrovna nodded, a grim victory tightening her lips. "Go and pack. Take your things." She said things as if referring to contaminated objects. I was frozen, a statue of despair. The command to move my limbs wouldn't come. I was going to break down, to sob right there on the linoleum floor she despised because it was too modern. Then, a new sound. A soft, deliberate clearing of a throat. We all turned. In the doorway to the small, book-lined study that was perpetually closed stood Nikolai Ivanovich, Mark's father. He was a quiet man, a retired history teacher who spent his days among his books and stamp collection. He spoke little, and when he did, it was usually about the weather or a historical fact. Tamara Petrovna treated him as furniture, a harmless, irrelevant relic of her past mistakes. I had tried to connect with him, bringing him tea, asking about his books, but he remained politely distant, a man deeply entrenched in his own silent world. He stood there now, leaning slightly on the doorframe, his reading glasses in his hand. He looked not at me, not at his ex-wife in her triumph, but at his son. His gaze was different. The habitual vagueness was gone, replaced by a sharp, disappointed clarity. "No," he said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the tense room with the weight of a stone. Tamara Petrovna blinked, incredulous. "Kolya, this is not your concern. Go back to your books. This is between me, Maxim, and his wife." "It is my concern," Nikolai Ivanovich replied, his voice gaining a firmer texture. He stepped fully into the living room, an unassuming figure in his worn cardigan, yet he seemed to occupy more space than he ever had. "You have made a fundamental error, Tamara. Several, in fact. But the most pertinent one is about the ownership of this roof you keep invoking." He paused, letting his eyes travel from his ex-wife's furious face to his son's confused one. "This apartment, Maxim, is not yours. It was never transferred to you. The documents are in my name. It is my property." The silence this time was absolute. Mark's mouth hung open. "But, Father, you said when I got married, I said you could live here." "I never said I gave it to you. There is a difference." Nikolai's tone was that of a teacher stating a simple, overlooked fact. I remained on the title, a precaution I thought unnecessary, but my years have taught me that precautions are rarely unnecessary. Tamara Petrovna found her voice, sputtering. "This is a trick, a lie. You wouldn't dare. We live here. Maxim is your son." "He is my son who just told his wife to leave her home to appease you," Nikolai said, and for the first time I heard a thread of steel, cold and ancient in his voice. He has forgotten what it means to be a husband, and you, Tamara, have long forgotten what it means to be a guest, let alone a decent human being. He turned his gaze to me. His eyes, usually hidden behind a scholarly haze, were kind and terribly sad. Amma, you are not going anywhere. This is your home for as long as you wish it to be. You have shown more grace and strength under relentless siege than anyone had a right to expect. Then he addressed the room, his verdict calm and final. The situation is untenable. Tamara, Maxime, you have 1 week. 1 week to make other arrangements and remove yourselves and, he glanced at the oppressive sideboard, your belongings from this apartment. Anna will stay. I will stay. The decision is made. The aftermath was a study in collapsed realities. Tamara Petrovna erupted into furious, sputtering denials, then tearful pleas, then icy threats. Mark alternated between begging his father and casting bewildered, almost accusatory glances at me, as if I had orchestrated this seismic shift. Through it all, Nikolai Ivanovich was an immovable rock. He did not raise his voice. He simply repeated the facts. His name on the deed, the 1-week deadline, my right to remain. The following week was a surreal blur of packing, their packing. Tamara Petrovna moved like a vengeful spirit, wrapping her figurines in newspaper with violent precision. Mark was sullen and silent, speaking to me only about practicalities. The atmosphere was thick with a poisonous mix of outrage and shock. I stayed in my room mostly, venturing out only when necessary, feeling like a ghost in a drama that had suddenly rewritten itself around me. Nikolai Ivanovich, however, began to emerge. He would knock softly on my door in the evening. "Anna, would you like some tea? I've made a proper pot, not from bags." We would sit in the kitchen, now strangely quiet without Tamara's commentary, and drink tea from simple, sturdy cups. He didn't offer platitudes. He talked about history, about how the quietest people in the room often held the most power because they observed while others performed. He talked about his own marriage, the slow erosion of respect, his own failure to push back until it was too late. "I saw it happening to you," he said one evening, his voice low, the light going out. "I told myself it was not my place. I was wrong. Sometimes neutrality is complicity." On the 7th day, they left. Tamara Petrovna departed with a final glacial stare that promised eternal enmity. Mark's goodbye was a mumbled, "Take care of yourself, Anya." There was no apology, only a bewildered shame. The door closed behind them, and the silence that filled the apartment was new. It wasn't the tense, waiting silence of before. It was a deep, clean, expansive quiet. Life did not magically become perfect. The echoes of their presence lingered in empty spaces on the walls and in the emotional bruises on my heart. My marriage was over. The divorce proceedings, when I initiated them, were a cold, administrative formality. Mark, adrift and financially strained without the anchor of the apartment, offered little resistance. But in the aftermath, something unexpected grew, a partnership of survivors. Nikolai Ivanovich and I, two people wounded by the same forces, began to rebuild a home. We repainted the living room a soft, warm gray, banishing the memory of dark wood. We donated the ballerina figurines. We took turns cooking. He taught me his excellent recipe for meatballs, and I introduced him to pasta dishes that didn't involve canned fish. He became the father-in-law I never had, and the protective father I sometimes wished Mark could have been. He encouraged me to apply for a more ambitious position at the design firm. He framed one of my abstract sketches, the ones Tamara called scribbles, and hung it in the hallway. "It has energy," he said, nodding decisively. One evening, months later, we were on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the old buildings in warm gold. The familiar, comfortable silence settled between us. "Nikolai Ivanovich," I began, my voice soft, "thank you for that day, for everything after. You didn't have to—" He waved a gentle hand, cutting me off. "Anna, you must understand. I did not do it only for you." He looked out over the city, his profile thoughtful. "I did it for him, too, for Maxim. A man who cannot choose his wife over his mother's tyranny is not yet a man. Perhaps losing this crutch will force him to grow his own spine. And I did it for myself. For too many years, I was a shadow in my own life, letting louder voices dictate the terms. That day, I finally decided to step into the light. You gave me a reason to. He turned to me, a faint, wise smile on his face. We saved each other, I think. I looked at this quiet, brave man who had wielded a property deed like a shield and changed the course of my life. The heroism of loud speeches and dramatic gestures is often celebrated, but I learned that true strength can reside in a soft-spoken history teacher who chooses, finally, to make history in his own home. He was my unseen shield, and in the quiet sanctuary we built together, I finally, fully found my voice again.